Thanks for showing up, everyone. Maybe you can help me do a sound check. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thanks for the feedback. Let's wait another minute or so. Taking a moment and appreciate that we have this Tuesday group. Not alone. And I think it's important to go even beyond this specific group that's gathering now, but finding a way to sense that we're part of so many human beings over many centuries who've had the good fortune to have enough space in their lives, not completely overwhelmed by trying to survive, and to be reflective about this very human experience of our heart feeling burdened by life, by insecurity and vulnerability, and just the unavoidable pain that comes with existence. And we've had the good privilege to be reflective and supported by these teachings from the Buddha about how to take a look at our heart and take a look at the causes for stress and the causes for release. And I think it's really helpful to see this as a profound privilege that we've had the support to do this. In a way, we're doing it for all the people who don't have that opportunity because they are overwhelmed or don't have the supports in their life that support that. And let's go ahead and settle into our sitting practice, coming into the experience of the body sitting here, learning not to be afraid, to feel what it feels like. In other words, to be receptive and authentically interested, willing to be vulnerable to what's moving now in the body, including the more subtle energetic qualities, emotional qualities in the heart, as best we can, giving permission for everything that's moving to move, that it's okay. It's, in fact, it's nature, it's natural for whatever's moving in our body, in our heart, in our minds, in the world around us. It's natural, it's unavoidable for all that's moving to be moving. And right here in the middle of it all, we feel the sensations of the sitting body. And right here in the experience of the sitting body, we feel the sensations of breathing in and breathing out just as they are. We don't need to change how the body is breathing. We simply track the physicality of breathing in, tracking the physicality of breathing out just as it is. And we're using this attentiveness to the ordinary process of breathing in and breathing out, whatever that feels like now, here embodied here. We're using that to easily let go of whatever else the mind would be attending to. So by choosing to be interested in this natural process of breathing in and breathing out, the mind begins to experience some freedom from its ordinary worries and tendencies to plan and to compare and to analyze or problem solve. So see if you can develop this simple, non-controlling interest in this natural process of breathing in and breathing out. Whether you feel that as a touching as the air comes in through the nostrils, or you feel it as a rising and falling of the abdominal wall, or however that rhythm of breathing is felt in the body. So it's on the one hand being relaxed, because we're not controlling, we're not trying to fix anything. But on the other hand, persisting, so making the effort to not forget, to keep this physicality of breathing in mind. Making this simple effort to keep the breath in mind. And we're allowing the breath to express itself as a natural process that doesn't require mental control, although it might feel that way. So we have to accept the quality of the breath, however it might be. And you might notice some refinement in the breathing process as things settle. The more simple the mind becomes, the more settled the body often becomes. And there's a certain pleasure in this simplicity, or often we refer to it as seclusion. The mind somewhat secluded from what is agitating. So notice that relative pleasure of seclusion as you breathe in. As you breathe out, notice the refinement of the breathing process, if that's what's happening. And when there is some stability, some settledness, you can take up the next instruction from the Buddha, breathing in, experiencing the whole body, breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So it's widening the sensitivity to be inclusive of the totality of the body. Still feeling the rhythm of breathing in and breathing out, but having a more inclusive awareness. Nothing left out. That sense of a generous yes as you breathe in, feeling the whole body. And then again, that generous yes as you breathe out, feeling the whole body. And in a very subtle way, just that sense of a inner smile, or maybe even an actual smile as you're breathing in, experiencing the whole body, breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So just that sense of appreciation that at this time things can be this simple. Just breathing in, sensitive, open to the whole body. Breathing out, sensitive, open to the whole body. So let there be, even if it's subtle, let there be a sense of gratitude or appreciation if that's available now. As if, as is often the case, we've been somewhat negligent of our body, but now we're really here. Awareness, kindness, patience, forgiveness, it's all here as we breathe in, as we breathe out. In that sense, we're really in relationship, harmonizing even with the body as it is. And then the next instruction from the Buddha, breathing in, one trains oneself to experience embodied well-being, embodied calm and well-being. So we're just sensing the body's response to this non-judging presence is that bodily sense of well-being or calm. So breathing in, experiencing that bodily calm. Breathing out, experiencing the bodily calm. And just allow it to naturally spread more and more. So we feel that bodily calm, that embodied sense of well-being throughout the body with practice. Breathing in, experiencing this bodily well-being. Breathing out, experiencing this bodily well-being, this bodily calm. However faint it is initially, we just practice keeping it in mind and letting it naturally spread, fill the body, so to speak. Nothing left untouched by this bodily calm. And then even more subtle than that beautiful quality of embodied calm, embodied well-being, is this lightness of heart we call joy or rapture. Piti is the Pali word. So the Buddha's instruction here is one trains oneself while breathing in to experience joy, and training oneself while breathing out, experiencing joy. So we're learning to keep joy in mind. We're learning to be interested in joy as we breathe in and breathe out. That buoyant lightness of the heart, brightness of the heart, this joyful interest. You can even feel it sometimes vibrationally, as if there were an inner light, a brightness, an inner vibration of joy. And we're just learning to keep that in mind as we breathe in. Keep that quality of the heart in mind as we breathe out. Joy is an essential medicine, an essential quality in the awakening process. So the Buddha is asking us to come into relationship by being interested in it. We're not trying to make anything happen, just learning to notice what's subtle, how to grow these wholesome qualities of the mind by learning to notice what's subtle and keep it in mind, as if our own heart has a beautiful, bright smile shining out, breathing in, experiencing joy, breathing out, experiencing joy. And for the last minute or two, you might notice a natural maturing of that joy into a more resonant ease of the heart, more and more of the happiness of contentedness, of not needing things to be different than they are. So here the Pali word is sukha, and the Buddha's instruction is one trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing this ease of the heart, and one trains oneself while breathing out, learning to experience the ease of the heart, that deeper, more resonant, you could say, spiritual happiness of the heart, spiritual trust, sense of inner safety. Taking your time, and we'll take a moment for folks to stretch a little if you'd like. Good to be with everyone. And just a reminder to folks that I spotlight myself because we stream right to our YouTube channel. on Tuesday nights, and also the audio eventually gets put up on dharmacy.org. But that way, especially during the discussion time, your video will never get captured in the recording. But during the discussion time, audio does get captured, just so you know. And I want to offer a big thank you to Mira Young, who taught last Tuesday. For those who weren't there, really grateful that Mira covered for me. I was hoping to teach our annual, I think we've done it almost 33 times now, this annual year-end retreat. Shelley Graff and Wynn Fricke and I taught this time, and that was great. We had over 30 people sitting at our city center in Minneapolis and about 20 people sitting out at the retreat center in Western Wisconsin, and more than 30 people practicing online on Zoom. So it was a 3-part retreat, and we all joined together on Zoom, whether they were at the city center or at the retreat center or online. But yeah, it was really nice way for the community to gather. And some of you probably saw the weekly blurb. If you feel part of the community, you might want to get on that email list to get the weekly email from the center. You can do that on our website or just send the center an email, and one of the office volunteers will put you on the list to get that weekly email. But I was mentioning a comment from Joseph Goldstein. I was teaching out at the Forest Refuge in Massachusetts, part of Insight Meditation Society, and we invited Joseph Goldstein to do a Q&A session at the end of December, at the end of the month of teaching. And I got to facilitate that. And the last question from one of the retreatants that I asked Joseph was, among the many Buddhist teachings, what teaching stands out as something that is maybe less used or less understood that would be really useful? And Joseph had a very quick answer. And of course, we were running out of time. He said, have fun. And he said, you won't find that in the Buddhist teachings, although he did talk about joyful interest. And I don't know if I'd use the word fun, but definitely joy is an important element. Just generally in human life, we need it. It's like necessary medicine. And in general, with wholesome qualities like joy, it's strengthened through recognizing it. I mean, that would just be such a great ritual to have with somebody you live with before you go to bed, just to reflect together on simple, ordinary moments of joy and to become really fluent, because we're pretty good, probably most of us, especially those of you with personalities like mine. I tend to be more at the critical end of the personality spectrum, as opposed to a greedy type, who delights in fun things. And, I generally see what's wrong with things. But we're generally pretty good in reporting all the things that happen that we didn't like. We remember them. They stand out in our heart. So it's easy for me to recall some of those things. But moments of joy, well, we often miss that. And of course, there are a lot of difficulties in practice. And remember, real joy, in the spiritual sense, joy isn't the opposite of pain. What we would consider ordinary happiness, like getting what we want. That's a kind of happiness, to get what we want or to not have what we don't want. But that maybe isn't a good definition of the joy we're talking about to be looking for. One of the reasons I did the guided meditation the way I did tonight is that I wanted folks to get that sequence that is there in the Buddha's instructions on mindfulness of breathing, the Anapanasati Sutta, the discourse on mindfulness of breathing. And the Buddha has 16 instructions, and we covered the first five or six of them tonight. And but I like it because it's right from the very beginning, there is a thread of spiritual joy. Even at the very beginning instructions where the Buddha is just asking us to track the physicality of breathing in and breathing out. And I mentioned it as that pleasure of seclusion. Like, because I'm all in noticing the physicality of breathing in and tracking, keeping in mind the physicality of breathing out, my mind can't do so many other things it would otherwise do, like worry or plan or compare or fantasize or, any number of those mental activities that we absorb into and obsess about. So when we're doing something very simple, but we're doing it with a whole heart, we're all in, we're not holding back. That doesn't mean we're tight, right? I always use the example of, it's just so vivid to me, but when you're out in the woods, maybe it's somewhat dark, dusk time, and you hear an interesting sound, or you suspect a rare animal is close at hand. There's like the body gets very still and all of our senses come alive. But if we do that, generally, if you watch yourself, we don't get tight, we get soft and open, right? Because on some deep level, we already know that if we really want to connect with the way it is, like that rare animal that maybe is somewhere around and we're trying to sense it, see it, hear it, whatever. Somehow we know in our bones that the way to be more receptive, more sensitive is to soften, is to get out of the way, not to try to see or to try to hear, right? But just to relax, profoundly relax. And this is sort of the initial spiritual skill, meditative skill is, you could say it this way, like we're learning how to put down the world for a period of time. Not forever. It's not possible. It's not appropriate for us to aspire to put down the world forever. We're humans. We have a body. We're in relationship with life, with each other, with responsibilities and duties, karmic situations that we find ourselves in. So to sort of reject that is not the way forward in spiritual life. But to know how to put it all down is a real skill. So that's the first skill. And the technique, and there's many techniques, but one technique that the Buddha praises is mindfulness of breathing, using that ordinary process of breathing in and breathing out. Now, the key here is, as frustrating as it can be, as much resistance as there can be, and boredom, and who knows what else can show up in the process of training our heart to be intimate with something ordinary like breathing in, breathing out. The way forward in that practice is to sense the joy in it. We have to get interested in the joy. And that means often breaking through some arrogant conviction that there is no joy in the practice, right? Because it's easy to come to that conclusion, because compared to our juicy thoughts about what I'm going to do when I'm done with my meditation, or fears that we have in our life, which may be painful but are juicy, but compared to that, being intimate with the next breathing in or the next breathing out just feels like a big bummer. Like, what do I expect to get from being present with the breath? And it isn't what we get, like so much of our spiritual life, it's more about what's not there. Like when my heart is really all in remembering and keeping the breath in mind, fully interested. Not in a tight way, but in that real soft, receptive, like that sense of awe. Ah, breath coming in is like this. Whoa, breath going out is like this, right? There's really nothing in the way of that sense of wonder or awe, except our arrogant belief that it's not relevant, our breath, the next breath, right? That's the real obstacle, is the idea we have of mindfulness of breathing, right? Like it's a chore. It's a big pain in the butt. Why did I sign up for this? And of course, it's not the only practice, right? It's like some of you, I'm sure, have a more open style of meditation where you're just being aware of the next predominant experience, whether it's the breath coming in or a sound in the room or some mental activity, some pain in the body. It's really the same point. Instead of tracking the breath, you're just tracking what is predominant moment by moment by moment. But one way or another, this first stage in the meditative process has to be developed, which is the capacity to let go of the world. And by the world, I mean mostly our thoughts about the world and our entanglements with our thoughts about the world, our likes and our dislikes, right? We have to let that go, but we don't let it go directly. We let it go by giving our heart to this process of being aware of what's predominant or being aware of our meditation object, like the breath, and tracking it and being all in, not holding back, wholehearted, but not out of fear, not out of greed, but rather out of this pure interest. What is this natural process of breathing in, breathing out? And then once we get some momentum with that, then the Buddha's encouragement is to start opening up so there's less dependent on the specific anchor of, the breath touching the nostrils or the feeling in the abdomen or chest, that expansion and contraction. But realizing I can let it all, I can maintain that seclusion from my worldly thoughts, right? I have a vacation from my worries, my obsessions, my hopes, my fears, my wanting to solve problems, right? But now I can even do it being more and more and more open to the totality of what's being sensed. As I breathe in, taking it all in, breathe out, receiving, feeling everything there's here to feel. So, what's happening in that process is we're healing how the mind is relating to the experience of embodiment. Being sensitive in these five physical ways of seeing and hearing and sensing sensations and smells and tastes, right? This bodily sensitivity. That's what we're opening up to with that third instruction. And then that willingness to be all in as we breathe in and breathe out, that willingness to include it all. It's a little bit like a child playing and being all in the play, whether it's tag or whatever the play is, not holding back. There's a real dana. I love that teaching on dana. I know a lot of us always just associate it with the way that Buddhist organizations, at least in our tradition, get the support they need to function. But dana is a central insight about life and about happiness. There's really no happiness without understanding that life to be lived, if we want to experience happiness, somehow in our life, in our situation, we have to learn how to be all in, totally giving, right? And in totally giving, totally receiving, right? Fully receiving, fully giving. That's what I mean by being all in. And in our mindfulness practice, sitting for 45 minutes in the morning or whatever it is for you, It's really our opportunity, even with this very specific breath of being, specific practice of being with the breath, right? We're learning to be all into that natural process. That's what we're playing with in a sense. It's just like we're aligning because it's the whole universe is breathing in and breathing out. That's what we begin to feel. That's why it's so delightful, and it's the whole body coming alive with the in-breath and the whole body coming alive with the out-breath. So that's why that fourth instruction, which is usually translated as something like one trains oneself while breathing in, calming the bodily formations. One trains oneself while breathing out, calming the bodily formations. But the way I understand that is, because we've really harmonized with the totality of the body, breathing in and breathing out, the mind that's knowing the body is no longer in any way in conflict with the experience of the body. Not the idea of the body, but the actual activity of the body. There's no friction or there's no resistance between the mind knowing the intimacy of sensitivity and what's being sensed. So it's like a purification of that relationship between the knowing, the sensitivity, and what's being known, the body, right? And that, subjectively, we experience that as a beginning taste of freedom, right? Because we're experiencing what's not there. What's not there is all of the weight of my mind having a problem with the experience of the body, not the actual sensations of the body. It's the mind's resistance, the mind's struggling, the mind's conflict with the body. That's what goes away. And that's that fourth instruction, breathing in, experiencing bodily calm. Sometimes I'll use the phrase bodily well-being. It just sits better with me, the word well-being than calm, but you can use what works for you. And of course, you don't have to keep repeating the phrase, the instruction, but when you get disoriented, lost in thought, and you're starting over, yeah, you can just say the phrase again, the instruction again. Oh yeah, the Buddha's asking me, training oneself while breathing in, calming the bodily formations, or experiencing bodily ease, experiencing bodily well-being. And it's just like however we can sense that, however faint, we keep it in mind, keep it in mind. I want to read a little from an article by Joko Beck called Joy. I don't know if people know Joko Beck. Uh, Joko Charlotte Beck is her given name. Joko is her Zen name. She was a very well-known and respected Zen teacher, was the head of the San Diego Zen Center for many decades. Um, and yeah, she passed away maybe 7 to 10 years ago, something like that. Has a couple of wonderful books out um, that I highly recommend. And even though Joko Beck is a Zen teacher, she really teaches in a way that seems very much similar to how we teach in our insight meditation lineage. I'm often accused of emphasizing the difficulties in practice. The accusation is true, believe me. The difficulties are there. If we don't recognize them and why they arise, we tend to fool ourselves. Still, the ultimate reality, not only in our sitting, but also in our lives, is joy. By joy, I don't mean happiness. They're not the same. Happiness has an opposite. Joy does not. And that's really important. Like that, remember, some of you have heard me teach that simile that Ajahn Chah uses about the log floating down the river. And one side of the bank is the bank of happiness, getting what we want. And the other side of the bank of the river is unhappiness, getting what we don't want. And our job as this log in all the currents of life, the currents of our karmic situations, of what's coming and going, right, is to not get confused by both banks. The bank of getting what we want, happiness, and the bank of not getting what we want. But joy is different. Joy is the beginnings of sensing that the log and the floating and absolutely everything is just this dance of nature, that it's in a very real sense all happening on its own. It's a kind of loosening the screws of being serious. There's a poem that I like. I had it in the weekly email last week, Tripping Over Joy. It's one of those poems that it's a free translation of one of Hafiez's poems. Hafiz is one of those Persian Sufi poets from around the 13th century. I forget exactly when, but somewhere in that time. Not so different time than Rumi was also, a Sufi poet back then. And the title is translated as Tripping Over Joy. What's the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and that the beloved has made such a fantastic move that the saint is now continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, I surrender. Whereas, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have a thousand serious moves. Yeah, and I really like that, a thousand serious moves, right? This is this strong, and I like to add the word arrogant conviction that we fall into. It's chronic for all of us, I think. This arrogant sense that uh, life is hard, basically. And of course, there's good evidence. I mean, there is just so much suffering and so much mean-spiritedness and so much, just trauma and violence and injustice. So it just makes so much sense because we see that, we sense that, and sometimes unfortunately experience that, um, to draw a conclusion about life. And the problem with that conclusion our mind draws is we stop noticing, in a sense, the other half of life. And unfortunately, it's the more subtle aspect of life. So it's easy to dismiss it, to miss it. So this is a little bit more from Joko Beck. From time to time, we do experience joy. It can arise accidentally or in the course of a sitting or elsewhere in our lives. For a little while after retreat, we may experience joy. Over the years of practice, our experience of joy deepens. If that is, we understand practice and are willing to do it. Most people are not. Joy isn't something we have to find. Joy is who we are if we're not preoccupied with something else. When we try to find joy, we are simply adding a thought, and an unhelpful one at that, onto the basic fact of what we are. We don't need to go looking for joy, but we do need to do something. The question is what? Our lives don't feel joyful, and we keep trying to find a remedy. And by the way, I think I mentioned, but this article is listed in the resources that I put in the chat, so you can check that out when you want. And another place in Joko Beck's teaching, she has this really great simile. She says, it's like we have a perfectly fine house with lots of nice windows, big door with glass in the door, you know, And then because we're neurotic, we go ahead and build another house right on top of that house, right? And it encompasses that house. And so that house gets really dank and musty, right? Because it's a house inside a house. Doesn't work. And the way she describes this in this article is that what she uses the word perception. There is this capacity to just be in the state of pure perceiving, pure perception, just seeing things as they are, what some people might call bare attention, or just being intimate, just being simply present in that intimate way. And then, but we have this, over time, have built up this deep habit, and she calls it evaluating or evaluation, right? Where we, from a self-centered point of view, we think about what we're perceiving. And we think about what we like, and we think about what we don't like. And then we think about, that papancha is the Pali word for that really deep tendency for mental proliferation. And so basically, Joko Beck is saying there is joy. A little later, she says, until we know that joy is exactly what is happening, minus our opinion of it, we're only going to have a small amount of joy. This is a very famous sentence. I've heard so many people quote this sentence. Let me read it again for you. Until we know that joy is exactly what's happening, minus our opinion of it, we're going to have only a small amount of joy. So this is joy minus any entanglement we have with our thoughts about it. It's not so much we can't have thoughts, but we're going to lose joy if we get entangled with our thoughts about the present moment. It's totally fine for there to be thoughts. That part of the mind that thinks, that's what it does. Eyes see, ears hear, tongue tastes, nose smells, skin senses sensations, and the mind thinks, right? So we don't want to pathologize or demonize thinking. The problem is the misunderstanding of thoughts. And because we misunderstand thoughts, we feed more and more thinking. Thinking has a very important role. As social beings, thinking and language in general, it's how we communicate with ourselves and communicate with each other, right? So it has a place. It allows us to abstract, right? And to plan, right? So there's nothing wrong with planning either, but we get entangled with these mental activities. So in terms of finding joy in our lives, you know, it might be that we're looking in the wrong place. And that's why I like this presumption. And I would encourage you just to build this habit at the beginning of a sit, once you settle yourself and clarify what you're doing here in the meditation time that you've set aside for yourself. But just remember that the basic guide for us in our meditation is this thread of joy. I mean, it's true just generally in life, but even more so in our spiritual practices and our meditation practice, that's what takes us inward. Now, it's not the joy of being physically comfortable in our sitting posture, but it's nice if we can feel comfortable in our sitting posture to begin with, right? And it's nice if we're in a pleasant room. It's nice if the temperature is pleasant and if we're surrounded by pleasant fellow meditators. I mean, there are a lot of ordinary level nice things, but the thread of pleasure that I'm talking about is the pleasure that's inherent when there's this moment minus our thoughts about it, to quote Joko Beck, or there's this minus that unnecessary overlay, like that simile of building a house on top of a perfectly fine house, which we do all the time. And another way to think of this is, I mean, that's what happens when, like that phrase we have in English now, being in the flow of things. And that can happen, of course, when we're knitting, when we're cooking, when we're jogging or taking a walk, when we're playing with a friend, when we're dancing. I mean, think about those times when, we feel a little bit in the flow. I so appreciate now, it's not that it happens all the time, of course, but in my walking meditation, even when I'm, leading a retreat, but able to do some of the walking meditation with everyone else, just little moments of rapture when there is just the walking minus, say again, it's about what's not there. It's not that the walking itself is special, or even that the way the mind is aware of the walking is special. It's just that the mind isn't doing what's extra. It's not evaluating, it's not building a superstructure around my experience in the moment. It's just walking, being known. And the subjective experience of that is one of that delight, of that lightness of heart, that buoyant, expansive feeling, as if it's literally subjectively, the felt sense is as if it's happening on its own. Like the walking process itself isn't me walking. There's walking minus the sense of me doing it. And that is experienced subjectively as delightful, joyful. And the key is to see that that is actually the way it is. It's not some mystical experience that's arising because I'm being blessed by some divinity. It's because we've trained the heart to be really in the moment, to be really simple, simply there in the walking, in the swimming, in the dancing, in the chopping of vegetables, in the brushing of teeth, even in the listening to Dharma talk. This is true. This happens. It happens to me at times listening to a Dharma talk. And again, it's easy to think, oh boy, that person is just doing a great Dharma talk. But actually, there's a listening to the Dharma talk. And then at some point, maybe for just a moment, maybe for a few seconds, maybe a little longer, the mind stops doing anything extra. So there's just the mind that knows, the mind that listens, listening, and nothing extra, except that is experienced as that healing joy, that bright, everything happening on its own feeling. And it leaves one feeling really confident that something is at hand. There's a point to the spiritual practice, right? Like it isn't the end of the path, but it's really, in a sense, the beginning, right? Where we start to sense, oh, there's so much here that I don't know, that I haven't experienced. Another great simile that I've gotten from Joko Beck that I so appreciate. I've heard other people use it, so I'm not sure where the origin of this simile is, and I'm guessing it's decades or centuries old because it's just a great simile for the spiritual process. And it just has to do with water, H2O. And when water is really cold, we get ice. When and I, my partner and I, are up right next to Lake Superior. We were walking along the lake today, and the ferry is still going out to Madeline Island. So they've cut the channel and the ice, and it's all slushy. So they might just have another week before they have to close the ferry down. But, just seeing the big chunks of ice on the lake, it's 4, 5, 6 inches thick. So when water is frozen, it's ice, and it's brittle, and it's cold, and it's hard, and not very malleable, not very workable, right? And then you heat it up and you get water. Well, water is a lot more malleable, not a lot more fluid, right? And then you heat that up and you get vapor, which is much more like space, much more expansive. And this is the thing about loosening, the ways we practice in our path is in loosening screws, abandoning what's extra, not feeding habits of greed, hatred, and delusion. Like another simile, great simile from the Buddha, where we periodically don't add 40 cartloads of dried fuel to the bonfire, right? Instead of an ordinary human being is a being that regularly adds 40 cartloads of fuel to the bonfire, and that bonfire burns on and on and on. So we stop adding fuel and things get simple. Just like we did when we're tracking the breath coming in and out, or however you practice coming into that more simple presence, right? Because we're all in and keeping the breath in mind, the mind naturally has to be all out in terms of thinking about this and worrying about that and planning and remembering and fantasizing about the future. It has to abandon that. And that's the not putting fuel into the fire. And that's that movement from ice to water to vapor. Now, it's not a perfect simile, but it's just that sense of, because a lot of the times in our life, we do feel so fixed, so solid. And because of that, our problems, the suffering in life feels so real that we don't have any space to have a fresh look about our human experience. We just feel like an animal that's cornered by the difficulties, scary stuff in life. And getting tight and reacting with tightness feels like the only option. And that's what we do. So part of what we're doing is we're building that sense, that confidence that we don't know everything. That's the humility. And so we're willing to do things that initially appear out of the box, like be with the breath. Even though it's just the breath, breathing in and the breath going out. But something profound is happening by being wholeheartedly with the breath. We're letting go of whatever else we would be doing with the mind. And we start to feel more free, more light, right? This whole sense of the body and the mind becomes refined. Instead of agitated, it feels simple in a more pure, simple way. And that subjectively is experienced as the beginnings of joy, that pleasure of seclusion. And then it's just that maturing, following that thread all the way to the deepening of insight. It leads there directly, naturally. So the Buddha says, just as in the great ocean there is but one taste, the taste of salt, so in this doctrine and training there is but one taste, the taste of freedom. In the beginning, in the middle, in the end. It's not like we have to practice for decades before we taste the taste of freedom. It's like we can't practice for decades unless we are being encouraged to get interested, to sense the pleasure that's there. What does I mean, the thing is, we know very well the experience of our heart discombobulated, agitated, pushed around this way and that way by our likes and dislikes. So we know what it's like to be tormented by our mind, by our mental activities, right? So But have we made a real art of noticing when there's less of that torment and even less of that torment, and kind of mapping out in our own experience, not intellectually, but mapping out, oh, this is a mind that's really tormented. This is a mind I'm experiencing now that is less tormented. This is a harder mind that has very little torment at all. This is the peace, this is the lightness of a mind with very little torment. Can I let that in? Can I express some authentic interest? Can I let that experience spread? Because one of the things is noticing it strengthens it. Like really bringing it into view. Oh, this is the heart's delight. Oh, this is ease. Oh, this is quietness. This is peace. Like this whole refinement of our experience of spiritual happiness, we could say. This is Ajahn Chah. Peace within oneself is to be found in the same place as agitation and suffering. It's not found in a forest or on a hilltop, nor is it given by a teacher. Where you experience suffering, you can also find freedom from suffering, right? Because it's about what drops away. And he goes on, trying to run away from suffering is actually to run toward it. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. And if you let go completely, you will have complete peace. So I'll just end by, I want to share just some teachings from the Buddha on this, just the peace of Nibbana. So he says, this is peace, this is exquisite, the resolution of all fabrications, right? So the mind ceasing its entanglement with fabrications, with its own mental constructions, the relinquishment of all acquisitions, the ending of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. And Gil Fronsdal, in his article on nibbana, writes, experiencing nibbana is like taking a dip in a refreshing pond. A quick dip, and we are slightly refreshed. With a long soak, we are thoroughly refreshed. Even the first brief dip into nibbana is a powerful lesson in the possibility of great happiness, freedom, and peace, not dependent on the conditions of the world. As long as someone believes happiness can only be found through the right conditions, it makes sense to cling to those conditions, even when knowing full well that all conditioned phenomena are subject to change. But when there is a direct, visceral experience of an alternative, the enchantment that fuels this clinging lessens dramatically, right? We start orienting in a different direction, right? Instead of the direction being acquisition, acquiring what is the cause for happiness, we're now interested in the happiness of letting things cease, letting things end, letting what is unnecessary, yeah, the house building, constructing something on top of joy that's already here. So I'll leave it here. There's time for discussion now. Just it's nice for folks to just share about what you have learned about the experience of joy. And one of the things that our wise teachers tell us is when we experience our mind with a lot of peace, a lot of joy, a lot of wholesome spiritual pleasure, then what wisdom naturally will do is it will wonder, well, what were the supporting causes for this experience, this very trustworthy, healing, deepening experience? What were the supporting causes? And we can do this for each other. So if you have a time in your life, in a meditation or just any time during the day, where causes and conditions were such that the heart felt, tasted some real peace, some real freedom, some real wholesome joy. And then reflecting for us out loud, well, what were the supporting conditions for that as you remember? What did you learn about that experience that allowed that experience to come to be so that your life going forward then can be informed by what you learned? And then our lives can be informed by what you learned. Yeah, please just unmute yourself. Always nice to share your first name. You can also share your pronouns if you'd like. So, if you feel like it, share where you're coming from. Anybody feel like getting the conversation started? And of course, questions always are okay.
I can share something, Mark.
Hi, Gail.
Hi. So this summer I was up north and I was taking a walk. We walk around Bass Lake, which is about a 4-hour walk. And I've done it quite a few times. But this year it had rained a lot. And so there were a lot of bugs and it was quite hot already in the morning when we started. So there was quite a bit of physical discomfort. Plus, there was the slipperiness of the rocks. So at first, I was just kind of trying to take it all in, And then I thought, well, I think maybe I will just focus on walking. I'll just do walking meditation. So I just focused on um, taking each step and became really, really continuous with that. There was also the um, possibility that if I fell, it would not be such a good thing. So I really was motivated to be continuous um, in, just the really simple activity of walking. But of course, I was out in beautiful nature. And as I walked, it just became magical just like the sticks on the ground or everything was like amazing. And, and, so, and that lasted for quite a long time. And, so I just realized that, um, yeah, just being in the moment and being continuous with a simple activity of walking, really brought a lot of joy.
Yeah. And what's really amazing when we have that experience, or even just hearing someone like Gail reporting an experience like that, where we have some confidence that that experience was real, that Gail reported, is uh, like, why don't we get interested in that? Now, I think the reason we don't is we have gotten interested in it, but with greed. It's like, oh, I want that. Whatever Gail had, I want. And but that's not the cause. Like, what was the cause? Well, Gail mentioned that word, it's kind of a Buddhist word, but that continuity. It's like how can we inspire the heart to be continuous in its intimacy, in its presence? That's the key, because then we start to experience things as they are. And that world, which is this world minus our, as Joko Beck says, our opinion of it, is just naturally alive. It's naturally free of our self-centered, the weight of self-centeredness. And and just to kind of keep us at least a sliver of confidence that that is perhaps available in any moment changes our level of interest, as we go through life. Like even when we're brushing our teeth tonight. Yeah, thanks, Gail, for sharing that beautiful story. There's a oh, by the way, Gail and Stacy McClendon are going to be leading an intro retreat somewhere in the middle of March. They do that every March, a long weekend retreat, Thursday night to Sunday. I think there's still maybe one or two spaces in that. So if you're new to Buddhist retreat practice, want to get a taste and can get yourself to Western Wisconsin, just east of Minneapolis at Common Grounds Retreat Center, go to our website. You'll get more information for that retreat. Anybody want to go next?
I can go. I'm Emily. I use she, her pronouns. I'm out in Portland, Oregon, so zooming in from the West Coast. And I got to sit the retreat with Common Ground last week, I guess, and just really appreciating being back at work this week in my co-working space and just the less self-involvement, and how much easier it is to connect with people when there's more presence and just less anxiety around saying the wrong thing or whatever. It just feels much more easeful. Just wanted to say that and appreciate that.
Thanks, Emily. Good to see you. And we said we have that phrase, someone's a force of nature. That's a kind of a neat thing. Like when we have more confidence in this practice, that like what Gail and Emily were pointing to, then just when you're meeting with someone, whether you know them, longtime friend or something, or just somebody you haven't met before, but just to have that, use that idea to sort of inspire the heart to be radically all in the interaction. Like they're just nature, they're just a force of nature. Because then the mind gets so much more interested in, like, wow, it isn't Emily, it's this, it's a reverberation or an expression of the universe, of nature. And it actually, all of a sudden, the mind is more willing to be interested in that simple way. You still have time for a couple more folks to share with us your own little, these are beautiful testimonials. So hopefully there's a few more.
My name is Erica, and I actually had a question. So I think perhaps I don't attune as much to the presence of joy or even freedom in my practice or maybe in my outside life. And um, I've appreciated the emphasis placed on that lately in Dharma talks here. But one of the thing I'm finding is that when I become aware of joy or even a sense of real freedom in my practice, it's almost like it has an exhilarating quality, and I'm it's feeling a bit like it's taking me out of myself. There's so much energy somehow sometimes generated by that awareness. And so I'm wondering how to work with that. It's like I'm losing the samadhi or ease in becoming awareness of the presence or aware of the presence of these other qualities. Or so I'm wondering if you have any guidance on what might be going on and what could be helpful in those situations.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So this is more, you're talking about mostly in the meditative experience as opposed to daily life?
Yeah, I'm aware of like there's more energy generated in my mind. Yes, mostly here I'm talking about in the practice, but I do think that it has some corollaries in when I become aware of a real sort of uncommon sense of freedom in other areas of my life where I'm just walking or all of a sudden and then I'm becoming aware of how I'm feeling really a just sense of ease and freedom. And it's like that generates a lot of energy that somehow I'm not settled in myself or in, yeah.
Yeah, this is not that uncommon, and it can be challenging, right? Because when we're sincere, we're practicing sincerely, lots of energy can arise at different points in the practice, and and it's more of an art than a specific science to how we come into relationship with all that energy. I mean, we did a little bit tonight that transition from the brightness of joy to a more calm ease of sukha, that sort of contented, right? That's a little bit more settled. But you can't make that happen. It can happen, it will happen, but it's going to be an organic thing. So partly you're going to have to experiment with a few things. One is when the energy is big, big energy is only a problem when there's a sense of something containing that big energy. So you can just see if you can sense that that big energy actually isn't bumping up against anything. Because is it actually bumping up against anything? What is it bumping up against? Maybe that isn't that boundary or whatever, that wall that it's bumping up. Maybe it's not really what we think it is. Maybe there's enough space for the big energy that wants to move, that wants to express itself. Maybe there's enough space so there's no pressure just because there's big energy. And so partly what we're doing, I said that a little bit with joy when I was doing in the guided meditation, like letting it spread, like letting it fill the entire space. So it's not concentrated in any one place, but it's felt equally everywhere, right? It has permission to spread, go everywhere. Um, and then the thing is, trying to control it, you see, it's like creating it adds it adds to that experience of pressure. So so part of it is like trusting it, and you'll see, you'll learn too, like what are you doing that seems to amplify that energy in a way that is felt as being uncomfortable. Like nothing just happens. So you can ask yourself when there's, when you're relating in what way, or when your mind is paying attention in what way, does that energy build in a way that feels uncomfortable or intense, right? Just to sort of read that. So those are just some different strategies, but just to know that it takes time to not be confused by big energies. And energy is good. We want energy, but we want to learn how that energy, big energy, can be in a potential state instead of in an activated state, right? Like there's a lot of energy, but the energy doesn't feel like it has to do anything. It's just there, but really settled. And that's sort of the direction meditation practice brings us. Lots of energy, but it's settled. It's so almost paradoxical, but it can get out of balance. And then we have kind of the experiences that you're talking about. And that's just part of the inevitable learning process because you're learning a new skill, like how to handle a lot of energy. Yeah, any follow-up, Erica, to that?
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should probably wrap it up, everyone. Great conversation. Thanks for coming tonight. Always good to see everybody. Hope you have a good week. And Buddhist Studies begins on Monday night. If you're interested, 6 weeks, mindfulness of the body, starting the Satipatthana Sutta for the next several seasons. Shelley will do mindfulness of Vedana, feeling tone in the spring. And then I forget when I'm doing it, but mindfulness of mind, late spring or early summer. I forget exactly when that will be. Take care. Feel free to unmute yourself and say goodnight if you'd like.